Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Benjamin Bloom. Alright, so here's an introduction and kind of a little crash course about Benjamin Bloom, I guess. Benjamin Bloom was an American educational psychologist who made contributions to the classification of educational objectives into the theory of mastery learning. He has influenced the practices and philosophies of educators around the world from the later part of the 20th century, obviously. He was born February 21st of 1913 in Lansford, Pennsylvania, to an immigrant Jewish family, since they were fleeing the discrimination they faced in Russia. He studied at Pennsylvania State College and received his master's and bachelor's degree by 1935, which was the year my grandma was born. He admired the work of Ralph Tyler. As a result, he enrolled in a doctoral program in education at the University of Chicago because he admired Ralph Tyler's work and so on. He evaluated an alternative methods of school assessment there. By 1942, he also received his doctoral degree. Starting in 1956, he edited the first volume of the Taxonomy of Educational Objectives, the classification of educational goals, which classified learning objectives according to a rubric that has come to be known as Bloom's Taxonomy, which is what we're going to be talking about a little bit later. This was one of the first attempts to systematically classify levels of cognitive functioning and gave structure to the mental processes of gifted students. Aside from this, Bloom also directed a research team that evaluated the process of developing exceptional talents in individuals, and it also shedded a light on the concept of greatness itself. However, today we're going to talk about Bloom's taxonomy, like I mentioned about 30 seconds ago. Bloom's taxonomy is a set of three hierarchical models used to classify educational learning objectives into levels of complexity and specificity. These three lists or domains that he was covering, they cover learning objectives in the cognitive mindset, the affective, and the sensory domains, so like touching and stuff like that. So we're going to start with the cognitive domain. The cognitive domain stands for knowledge-based. When we talk about this, the 6 things that fall under this category are remembering, which is knowledge, understanding, which is comprehension, applying, which is your application to certain things, analyzing, you're just kind of interpreting the material, evaluating, you're evaluating all the time, and create, which is, you know, kind of what we do in step 3 or knowing and learning, because it's just, you know, we read articles and then we create these little projects that show what we learned from that material. So I'm going to start with knowledge. Knowledge involves recognizing or remembering facts, terms, or basic concepts or answers without necessarily understanding what they mean. And then another thing that falls under after that is comprehension, which involves demonstrating an understanding of facts and ideas by organizing, comparing, translating, interpreting, giving descriptions, and stating the main idea pretty much. Which leads us to application, which involves using acquired knowledge, solving problems in new situations by applying that acquired knowledge that you already have. Facts, techniques, and rules, and you're basically just using prior knowledge to solve problems, identify and make connections in relationships, and how you can apply these to new situations. And that leads us to analysis, which involves examining and breaking down that information in the component parts, determining how the parts relate to one another, identifying motives or causes, or making inferences for that matter, and finding evidence to support generalizations. Evaluation involves presenting and defending opinions by making judgments about that information and the validity of ideas or quality of work based on a set of criteria. So evaluation is that thing that falls under after you analyze things, like you're just putting it together pretty much, which leads us to synthesis. Synthesis involves building a structure or pattern from diverse elements. It also refers to the act of putting parts together to form that whole that I was talking about. I mean, honestly, we can relate this back to the 5E model from step 1 as well. You know, I mean, it's very important. You know, we use all of these in the 5E lesson model. So the other domains that I was going to talk about is the affective domain. And the affective domain describes the way people react emotionally and their ability to feel others' pain and joy. These typically target the awareness and growth in attitudes and emotion and feeling in students. So there's 5 levels to this domain in the affective domain, moving through the lowest order to the highest order. And we're going to start with the lowest order. The lowest order of the affective domain is receiving, which is the lowest level, and the student passively pays attention, but really no learning can occur here. Receiving is about the student's memory and recognition, and that's not what we're seeing here. We're not seeing any of that learning. The next level is responding. Responding is when the student is actively participating with teachers in the learning process, and not only answers to a stimulus. The student reacts in some form or fashion. So we're getting that interaction there. We're not just, we're not just letting them listen and watch us. They're actually interacting with us. The next level is valuing, and that's when the student attaches a value to an object or a piece of information. The student can associate a concept and they can associate it to some sort of value. It's valuable to them and they hold on to that. The next level is organizing, which I really like this because I like being organized. As you can see, my room is kind of nice and neat. Everything has a place. In organizing, the student can put together different values, information, and ideas and can accommodate them with his or her own kind of thinking, And it's just, I kind of look back on the things we've done in this class as well. In this class, I know that we've done graphic organizers, stuff like that. That's really important, really cool, and it relates to what we learn in our readings. And as a result, we can see that the student is comparing, relating, and elaborating on what has been learned through organizing. The last level to this domain is characterizing, which is when the student at this level tries to build abstract knowledge based on the previous levels that we just looked at. And the last domain that I want to talk about, even though I know that this video is over 7 minutes long, we're going to talk about the psychomotor domain, which is that sensory thing I was talking to you about earlier, which is action-based, obviously, as the skills in this domain describe the ability to physically manipulate a tool or instrument, such as your hand. These objectives typically focus on change and or development in behavior or skills. And there's several different levels to this domain, obviously. So I'm just going to start with perception, which is the ability to use sensory cues to guide motor activity. So you're going to perceive something and then you're just going to do it. It's like watching by doing. And then you also have to be ready, which leads me to my next thing called set, which is the readiness to act. It includes mental, physical, and emotional sets, which predetermines how the student is going to respond to different situations pretty much. Additionally, this leads me to guided response. You know how watching by doing, yeah, you also can, continuously practice something and get better at it, obviously. So that leads me to guided response, in which the early stages of learning a complex skill that includes imitation and trial and error. The performance level is achieved pretty much by practicing, which that can be helpful in math in college for sure, at least on my end, but I practice by doing practice problems, it's just a repetition thing, more or less. Additionally, this leads me to my next topic. There's a thing called mechanism, which is the intermediate stage in a learning complex skill, which is when learned responses have become habitual. You've done it so many times, that you just finally understand it. And the movements can be performed with some confidence and proficiency. Not entirely, but it's there. It's not all the way there, but it's there. And that leads me to the next step. This is called the complex overt response, which is the skillful performance of motor acts that involve complex movement patterns. Thus, the proficiency is indicated by a quick, accurate, and highly coordinated performance. And it requires just energy, pretty much. You know, you've done it so many times that you're like, oh yeah, I have the confidence to do this for like the most part. You know, there's just a few things I don't understand. This also leads me to the next step, which is called adaptation. We see it all the time. We adapt to changes. We've adapted to the coronavirus change too. And this is when the skills are well developed and the individual can modify movement patterns to fit special requirements. So basically, you know the material enough to the point where you can manipulate it and apply it here, or do it here, or you can change it up a bit and make it your own. You know, it's not, what's the word for it? It's not like, oh yeah, your teacher gives you a problem and you're going through the movements, you know how to do it. You can change those numbers in the problem and then do it yourself again. It's a repetition thing again. Lastly, once we become adapted, we finally reach the last performance level, which is origination, which is when we create new movement patterns to fit a particular situation or specific problem. And as a result, learning outcomes emphasize the creativity based upon highly developed skills. Like I said, you know, your teacher gives you a problem, but you can make it a different problem and change the numbers yourself. I mean, it's, you know, it's making sure you know that material, once again. And that's pretty much Bloom's taxonomy. I know it's a lot. It's a long video, honestly. Which leads me to the fact that Bloom died in September 13th of 1999, and he has obviously played a significant role in the development of our curriculum today. And we can see that via the 5E lesson model today. So thanks for watching. I'm sorry that this video was so long.